Classified crime is on the case of Sarah Boone, and today we have detailed call logs from July as well as a total talk time for each person Sarah has called from January through July. Let's get into this. Okay, this is the call logs that I got. They start on July 1st, the report, and they run through 10/8. And from those date ranges, Sarah talked for a total time of 52 hours, 42 minutes, 34 seconds. That's her total accepted call time. I also did a little bit differently on this call log. I put these blue lines here to divide the days. So everything between the blue lines is on one day. And then I also highlighted in green if it indicated that it was a free call. So you'll see these green highlights. Some just say free call. Some say free courtesy marketing. I'm not sure what the difference is. Also, the last call log I did, I had a couple people comment who are these people that she's calling. So I'll really briefly go over that. Of course, her son is self-explanatory. Brian is her ex-husband who her son lives with. Her brother is self-explanatory, of course. Peter is a person who reached out to her about doing a documentary while she was in the Orange County jail. And he's still continuing to speak with her for the most part through this call log. He kind of stops mid-September though, so we'll see when we get to September. And if you join me on the live, you kind of saw a little bit more. You saw a little bit more ahead of the call log, so I will link that video here if you want to go ahead and jump ahead. Nicole is someone in Australia that reached out to her, like a pen pal kind of. I have found a little bit more information out about her, but not much. She just basically calls Sarah. She trolls in the chat sometimes, standing up for Sarah, so that's who she is. Julian is Peter's partner. She only calls Julian once on this call log. I also included some misdials here because if she tried to dial a number, but put the order wrong, like let's say this area code is 407, maybe she put 704 and the rest of the number matched, or 470, then I just called it a misdial. And then, who else is on here? Oh, Christina, she does attempt to call on this log at some point. Christina is someone that she met in the Orange County jail. She was an inmate there. So those are the people you're basically going to see on the log. That's just a quick overview of who they are. At the end of the video, I do have a total chart of all the calls she attempted and the percentage accepted. And then I also updated the total of each month and then added the total time that she's talked to each person from January through July. I will continue to do that through August, September, and when I get the rest of October. Let's get into these logs. So starting on July 1st, which was a Tuesday, and I'll put a calendar in the corner if you want to keep track of the day of the week. Of course, July is usually summer break for most people. Whether or not he's in a camp or something, we don't know, but it's not going to affect his school what day of the week it is because it's July. During the summer, my teenagers like to sleep in, but she starts off calling him at 8:50 in the morning. It's not accepted. That's the first call she makes. She tries Nicole at 8:52. Now, Nicole being in Australia is supposedly like 14 and a half hour ahead. So it would be more like 10 or 11 p.m. for Nicole at this time. And they talked for 29 minutes, 51 seconds. She called her son again in the afternoon on the 1st, and they spoke for 8 minutes, 22 seconds. She called her brother twice, back to back, at 17:41 and 17:44. He didn't accept the first call. He did accept the second call, and they spoke for 13 minutes, 16 seconds. She called Peter, let's see, 3 times in a row, 18:09, 18:30, and 18:32. All three of those were not accepted. On the 1st, we're still on the 1st. Her son, she called at 19:02, which would be 7 p.m., and 1904. Those were both not accepted. And then she tried Peter at 1906 and 1950. Those were both not accepted. So she did talk to Nicole for about 30 minutes, her son for about 8 minutes, and her brother for about 13 minutes on Tuesday the 1st. Moving on to the 2nd, she misdialed, but I did put here that I think she's trying to call Nicole because of the digits. Those were, of course, not accepted because they weren't the right number. Then she called Nicole at 8:57 a.m. on the 2nd, not accepted. She tried Peter at 8:59, not accepted. She tried Nicole again at 10:44 a.m., which if Nicole is 14 hours ahead, that's the middle of the night. That's, you know, she's, sorry, that was Snoopy sneezing. She's 12 to 14 hours ahead. So that's well into the middle of the night. But that was not accepted. Peter, she tried at 10:48. That was Snoopy again. Peter, she tried at 10:48 a.m. Not accepted. She tried him again at 14:38, 14:40, 14:41, and 18:40 on the 2nd. All of those were not accepted. She tried Nicole again at 18:42, and that was not accepted. And then she called her son at 18:44, and they spoke for just under 12 minutes. And that's the end of her calls on Wednesday the 2nd. Moving on to July 3rd, which should be a Thursday, she made quite a few calls. She started with Nicole at 9:41 in the morning, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. She then made a call to Peter at 11 a.m., which was not accepted. 11:02, she called Julian. This is her only attempted call to Julian on this whole call log, I believe, but at least in the month of July, and that was not accepted. Brian, she called 11:04 and 11:06. Both were not accepted. Peter, she tried at 13:23, and then her son at 13:28. Then Peter again at 17:09. All three of those were not accepted. She tried Peter again at 17:56, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. And then she called her son at 18:38. That was not accepted. And then she called her son again at 19:41, and they spoke for just under 18 minutes. So she made 3 successful phone calls on the 3rd to Nicole, Peter, and her son. On July 4th, which would have been a holiday here, she called Nicole back-to-back 9:39 and 9:42 a.m., both not accepted. She tried her son at 17:59 and 1800, both not accepted. She called Brian at 18:01 and 18:03, both not accepted. Then she tried her son at 18:05 and then Brian at 18:06. So not accepted. No one talked to her on July 4th. She then on the 5th talked to her son. Well, she attempted to call her son at 9:35. It was not accepted. She called him again at 9:36. Same result. Tried Nicole at 9:38. No, not accepted. She called Brian at 9:40. Not accepted. Her son at 14:35 in the afternoon, and that was not accepted. And then she called Peter at 14:35, and they spoke for about 10 minutes. So the only person she got in touch with on the 5th was Peter. Same thing on the 6th. She only got in touch with Peter. She tried her son at 9:28, Nicole at 9:29, Nicole at 9:31, all not accepted. She then called Peter at 14:35, and they spoke for 22 minutes, 37 seconds. And that's the only call she was able to successfully make on the 6th. On the 7th, she started out with her son in the afternoon, 13:38, and they spoke for about 4.5 minutes. She then called Peter at 14:40, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes on the 7th. She made 3 more calls on the 7th to Peter, her brother, and Peter again. None of those were accepted. She made all of those around 1800. On the 8th, we're starting out with a misdial. She was trying to call Nicole. Of course, that was not accepted. She then called Nicole's number correctly, and they spoke for the full 30 minutes. That was at 10:05 in the morning. Then on the 8th, she called Nicole again at 11:26, and they spoke for 17 minutes, 26 seconds. She then made 3 attempted calls to Peter at 17:41. He accepted that, and they spoke for about 14 minutes, and then she called him again at 18:39 and 18:41, and those were not accepted. Moving on to the 9th, she only made 2 calls. Both were accepted. Both were to Peter. She spoke to Peter for 11 minutes and then just under 10 minutes. So she spoke to him about 20 minutes on the 9th. On the 10th, the only call she made was to her son at 17:20, which would be 5:20 p.m., and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. The next day, on the 11th, she called Nicole 5 times. None of them were accepted. She tried starting at 8:57 a.m., 8:59, 9:01, 10:57, and 11 a.m. None of those were accepted. She then tried Peter twice at 14:42 and 14:44. He did not accept the first call. He did accept the second one, and they spoke for 29 minutes, 16 seconds. On the 12th, she started with Nicole at 9:28 in the morning. They spoke for 25, almost 26 minutes. Then on the 12th, she called her son twice. The first time he did not pick up at 14:29 in the afternoon. At 1500, which would be 3 p.m., they spoke for 30 minutes. She then called Peter at 17:29, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. She called her son, and it connected for 1 second. I don't know if she just didn't hang up quick enough before it started to count the time, but it just says 1 second. That was at 18:33 she contacted him. And then on the 12th at 1900, she called her son, 1901 again, and 1901 again. The first two were not accepted. The last one they connected for 37 seconds. So she talked to her son for a total of 38 seconds. If you add that 1 second, I don't know if she was just leaving him a message or what. And then Peter, and then she also had talked to her son for the full 30 minutes earlier in the day. So on the 12th, she made 3 successful calls to her son and 1 to Peter and 1 to Nicole on the 12th. All right, on the 13th, we have Nicole. She starts out at 8:49, 8:51, 9:50, 9:52. None of those were accepted. She then called her son at 9:55. They spoke for 6 minutes, 12 seconds. Again, in the middle of the summer, my kids are not up at 9, 10 in the morning. Just me. My kids sleeping late. He could be up going to a camp or something like that. She then called Nicole at 11:13 and 11:15. Those were not accepted. She tried Brian at 11:44. It was not accepted. That says it was a free call. That's the only free call on this page. She then called Brian 2 minutes later at 11:46, and they did speak for a minute and a half. She tried Nicole again on the 13th at 14:30. That was not accepted. She contacted Peter at 14:33. They spoke for just under 9 minutes there. Then she called Peter again at 15:08, 15:09, 15:10. None of those are accepted. On July 13th, she has 2 more calls to Peter at 15:12. He did accept this one. They spoke for 11 minutes, 28 seconds. And then she called her son, and they spoke for just about 3 minutes at 17:50. It does tell you here who disconnected the call. It says the inmate hung up or CP hung up, which I guess means called person. I don't know. On the 14th of July, we have 3 calls to Nicole and 1 call to her brother. So she called Nicole at 9:40 a.m. It was not accepted. Then she called Nicole at 9:42, and they spoke for 4 minutes, 24 seconds. And then she called Nicole again at 10:30 a.m., and they spoke for 30 minutes. She then tried her brother that evening at 18:01, and it was not answered or not accepted. On the 15th, she tried Nicole 3 times in a row, 8:43, 8:45, and then 10:51 a.m. The first 2 were not accepted. The one at 10:51 a.m., they spoke for just under 30 minutes. She then called her son at 13:58, and that was not accepted. She then called her brother at 14:01, not accepted. She then called Peter twice, 15:29 and 18:12 p.m. Both of those were not accepted to Peter. And then she called her son at 18:14. They spoke for exactly 24 minutes, and then it says time up. So they must have run out of prepaid time on the 15th. On the 16th, she made 5 calls. 2 were to Nicole. The first one at 10:54 a.m. was not accepted. At 10:57 a.m., they spoke for 27 minutes, 25 seconds. She then tried Peter twice at 17:47, 17:49. Both were not accepted. She tried her son at 17:51, and that was not accepted. On the 17th, she started with Nicole at 9:57 and 9:58. Those were not accepted. She then got a hold of Nicole at 10:03 a.m., and they spoke for 24 minutes, 37 seconds. She then called Nicole at 14:43, 14:45. Both were not accepted. Then Brian, she tried at 16:48 and 16:50. Those were not accepted. She then tried Brian again at 16:52 and 16:54. So the first 3 calls she made to Brian were not accepted. The last one, they talked for 2 minutes, 3 seconds. Then she called Peter at 17:41. That was not accepted. Or it says inmate hung up, but there's no call duration. Then her son at 17:47, 17:48. Those were both not accepted. She tried Peter again at 18:05. It was not accepted. And then she tried her son at 18:07 and spoke to him for 19 minutes, 24 seconds. Moving on to the 18th, she tried Nicole 4 times at 8:47, 8:55, and 8:57. All 3 of those were not accepted. And then at 9 a.m., they spoke for 14 minutes, 10 seconds. She then called her son at 14:35, and that was not accepted. She called Peter at 14:37, and they spoke for 23 minutes, 54 seconds. And then she called her son at 17:38, and they spoke for 12 minutes, 22 seconds on the 18th. On the 19th, she seems to start with Nicole a lot of times in the morning at 9:28 a.m. That was not accepted. She then contacted her brother later on the 19th in the afternoon at 13:44. They spoke for just under 12 minutes. She called her son twice at 17:19 and 17:21. Those were not accepted. She called Peter at 17:22. That was not accepted. She tried her son again at 17:47. Not accepted. She tried Peter twice, 3 times, 18:07, 18:08, and 18:10. All 3 of those were not accepted. She called her son at 18:12, and there's a 3-second connection. And it says the called person hung up, so I'm not sure what they talked about for 3 seconds. On the 20th of July, we have Nicole 3 times in a row, 10:38, 10:42, 10:44 a.m., all not accepted. She tried Peter 3 times in a row, 10:46, not accepted, but then she called him at 13:43 and 14:45, and those were both accepted. So the first one, they spoke for 29 minutes, 33 seconds, and the second call, they spoke for 20 minutes, 58 seconds. Then she called her son twice, and both times they spoke for just under 30 minutes. So they spoke at 17:32 for 29 minutes, and then 18:35 for 29 minutes. On the 21st, she called Nicole twice at 9:23 and 9:25. Both were not accepted. She then tried her son later on in the afternoon at 14:51, and they spoke for 4 minutes, 39 seconds. These all 3 were free calls on the 21st. She had one more call on the 21st to her son, and they did speak for just under 30 minutes at 18:08 p.m. On the 22nd, she called Nicole 3 times in a row. The first 2 were not accepted. The third, they spoke for just under 30 minutes and she attempted those calls at 8:36, 8:38, and 8:40. So the call at 8:40 was accepted for just under 30 minutes. She then called her son at 17:54 in the afternoon. They spoke for just under 13 minutes. The only call she made on July 23rd was to her son at 17:51, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. On the 24th, she made quite a few calls. So we start with Nicole at 8:41 and 8:43 in the morning. Those were not accepted. She tried Brian at 8:45 and 8:47. Those were not accepted. She tried Nicole again at 8:49 in the morning. That was not accepted. She tried Brian at 11:51, 11:53 in the morning, then 14:25 and 14:28 in the afternoon. None of those calls to Brian were accepted. She then called her son at 18:25, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. So that was the only call she was able to successfully make on the 24th was to her son. No one else was available. On the 25th, she called Nicole 3 times, 9:19 in the morning, 9:21, and 10:22. None of those were accepted. She then tried Nicole on 7:26 twice, 10:01 and 10:02 a.m. Those were not accepted. She then called her son at 18:21, and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. On the 27th, she tried Nicole twice in the morning, 9:54 and 9:56 a.m. The first call was not accepted. The second one, they spoke for exactly 30 minutes. She then tried someone named Jennifer. I'm not sure who Jennifer is, but that's who the number came back to. She called Jennifer at 13:26 and 13:28. Neither call was accepted. She then called her son at 13:30. They spoke for 4 minutes, 12 seconds. She then called David who is a family friend. David, and he has a wife that she talks to every now and then. She called him at 14:37 and they talked for 29 minutes, 41 seconds. On the 28th, she made one call to Nicole at 9:35 in the morning and it was not accepted. She then called on the 29th. She called Nicole 3 times. 10:21 in the morning, not accepted. 10:26, they spoke for 4 minutes, 52 seconds. That was a free call and those are only I think 5 minutes each. So that's why it's just under 5 minutes, I believe. Then they made a prepaid call at 11:17 and spoke for exactly 30 minutes until time was up. Then she called her son at 19:27 and they spoke for just under 30 minutes. On the 30th, she called Nicole 3 times at 8:53 and 8:56 and 10:17 in the morning. None of those calls were accepted. On the 31st, we've got, let's see, 3, 6, 7 calls. The first 2 were to Nicole at 10:38 and 10:40. The first call, it says no answer. The second call, they spoke for 18 minutes, 24 seconds. She then called her son at 15:08 p.m. They spoke for 3 minutes, 36 seconds. She tried her son again 4 more times that day at 17:32, 17:34, 18:28, and 18:31. None of those were accepted. All right, call totals for July. So she made 1 attempt to call to Julian. That was not accepted. She made 47 attempted calls to Peter. He accepted 14 of them. So 30% of her calls he's accepting. Her brother, she attempted 6 times. He accepted 2. So 33% of the calls she makes to her brother, he's accepting. Brian, she made 18 calls. He only accepted 2. That's 11%. A little bit higher than last month. Where he had only, I'm sorry, not last month, but in June, where he had only 5%. Her son, she made 52 attempted calls. He accepted 25, so about half or 48%. Nicole, by far, was the most attempted calls at 65. Nicole accepted 15 for 23%. David, she only called once. He accepted it, so he accepted 100% of her attempted calls, but it was only 1 call. Usually it seems like with David, they have those kind of like scheduled ahead of time where they're expecting her call and they accept her call, but it's not very often. It's like once a month, if that. All right, now let's go to the total minutes. Now I made this and I posted it on my post tabs in July. Well, it might have been after July, but I had the calls for half of July. So I had totaled everything through mid-July, but I updated it to include the full month of July and the totals for all months. So if you want to go back and look at the chart, it tells you each month how many calls were attempted, how many calls were accepted, and the total talk time she had with that person. Going all the way back to January. You can kind of compare how the calls either increase or decrease from month to month. Let's see. So between January through April, the most talk time she had was to Peter, this 11 hours in March. She had over 11 hours in March and 8 hours in April. That spiked significantly. So you can kind of see how he talked to her for like 41 minutes in January, 31 in February, but then in March he talked to her for 11 hours, and then in April, 8 hours. Her son, she talked around 3 hours in January, 2 hours in February, 5 hours in March, and 4 hours in April. Nicole, she did not talk to in January at all. In February, she talked for about half an hour. And then in March, 2.5 hours. And then April, 6.5 hours. So you can kind of see the trend there. She did attempt to call Billy in April. Billy Lane was her private investigator, if you're not familiar with him. So this is May through July. This is all of July. So you can see she talked to Julian once in May, once in June, none in July. And then here, the last column totals for all of January through July. So the total time she's talked to Julian since she's been there through the end of July was almost 7 hours. Peter, her totals for July, 4 hours. May, he had about 6.5. June, 4 hours. July, a little over, almost 5 hours. Her total talk time to Peter has been 35 hours, 47 minutes, and 8 seconds from January through end of July. Brian, the month of July, he only talked to her for 3 minutes, 35 seconds. June, it was only 3 minutes, 27 seconds. May, it was about 13, 14 minutes. So his total talk time to Sarah from January through July is 3 hours, 41 minutes and 26 seconds. Her son, in May, they talked almost 8 hours. In June, let's see, almost 3 hours. In July, almost 7 hours. Her total talk time to her son has been 32 hours, 9 minutes and 12 seconds. So if you add in Brian's time, you can calculate that. So if we have 32 plus 3 would be 35 hours, right? Times 60 minutes. So that's 2,100 minutes. Plus they had 41 and 49. That would be another 50 minutes. I'm not going to count the seconds. And we multiply that by 13.5 cents per minute. Of course, that's about $300. So let me make sure that's right. 2150 times 13.5. Yeah, so it would be $290.25. There were a few free calls in there. You could go through and subtract 5 minutes here and there. So even if you took 5 minutes a month, or 10 minutes a month, because she gets 2 free 5-minute phone calls a month. Even if she used both of those on either Brian or her son, we don't know that. We would have to go back and tally that up. That would be a maximum 70 minutes that we could take off. So even if we took off 2150 minus 70 minutes, let's say she used the full 10 minutes of free calls every month on Brian or her son, that would still give this times 13.5, which would be $280 for 7 months of phone calls. So that's like a significant bill over 7 months. If you divide, let's see, let me put this in money, 28 divided by 7 months, that's an average of $40 a month for phone calls. So just a little math there for us. All right, back to the chart. Her brother, he talked to her for 5 minutes in May, 21 minutes in June, 25 minutes in July. Total, since she's been there, 2 hours. Nicole, she did 7.5 hours in May, 2 hours in June, and just under 6 hours in July. Total time she's talked to Nicole has been 26 hours, 57 minutes, and 34 seconds from January through July. This guy named John, he just popped up in June. We kind of talked about him in the June call log video. I'm not really sure how she knows him. She did attempt 14 calls to him in June. He accepted 5 of them, and so he's talked to her for a total of 1 hour and 23 minutes. Billy, 14 minutes and 31 seconds total accepted call time from her. That was her private investigator assigned in her criminal trial, and I think she was desperately reaching out to him to get some help with her appeal or try to get in touch with someone. I don't know why she would think he would do that. David is her friend that I think took her 2 dogs. He has talked to her for a total of 1 hour and 35 minutes from January through July. Lana had a total talk time of 9 hours and 21 minutes. And Christina, she still did attempt calls to her earlier, and none of those are accepted. So she doesn't have any talk time. Lana, that 9 hours is only from a couple of months. So she only talked to Lana January, February, and 1 call in March. So that total is from January, February, March that she was talking to Lana, who also had reached out to Sarah and was helping her talk to Owens before he started representing her. And she was just kind of like reached out to her while she was in jail to kind of talk to her and helped her a lot from the outside of jail. Lana passed away this year, so she can no longer call Lana, but they also had a falling out. That's the totals. That's my dog. If you would like to continue to see the total talk time, it does take me a while to add it all up because I have to add it base 60, not base 10s or 100. So it does take me a minute to add it up, but I think it's kind of an interesting thing to see. This is also posted on my post tab, but it does only include through mid-July. This one includes the full month of July. So I can continue to add in August, September, October, And then I only have the first 8 days of October, so I probably won't total that one, but then I can give you the total talk time for each person, hopefully through the end of the year if I continue to obtain the phone call logs. So that's July. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will diligently work on August, which should be interesting because that's when she had her family court final hearing. She also had the deadline in September. So those will kind of be interesting to look at. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the comments.